This is a short video on how to reduce or eliminate distractions from social media, the internet, other modern technologies, and modern culture, which is deeply intertwined with all of the previous technologies. And it's based on my personal experience and the things that worked for me. Uh, the fixes that work for me may not work for you, but I'll describe my experience and what seems to work in my case. So I really became aware of this a couple of years ago when I started my business, and I actually got an office and I'll get to the wisdom of getting an office or a cubicle or something like that in a few minutes. But when I started my business, I found I was being absolutely bombarded with notifications on my phone, notification emails, all kinds of other disruptions, and literally several per minute, not per minute, but per hour were coming in. And when I've been working at Apple, which is very noisy and chaotic, I wouldn't say exactly chaotic, but noisy environment with a lot of meetings and other problems, I hadn't really noticed how bad it was. But when I was trying to work for myself and really focus on my projects, which require a very high level of concentration, I really noticed how bad this was. Um, and I hadn't really realized it. I had signed up for a lot of social media, put social media on my smartphone because I thought, hey, this is the new thing and I should do it. But then I realized I was being really distracted by this. It was very severe. I'm going to talk about the different steps I've taken over the last couple of years to really reduce the distractions. So one of the most basic things is to get over the FOMO, the fear of missing out. This is a really strong force in keeping one's notifications on and not being willing to unsubscribe from mailing lists and perform a lot of the fixes that I'm going to describe in this video. But you have to get over that. It's really the case that we just get way too much information today. The acronym is TMI, too much information. You need to really pare it down so we have time to really focus on the important things in our lives, in our work, and in society at large. And it's a really serious problem, in my estimation, both individually for people and for society, even in the entire planet. So the most basic things you can do are turn off non-essential notifications and emails. So what I'm talking about is promotional things, marketing. There's a lot of this kind of stuff. If you have some service or social media, Amazon, things like that, what you need to see are your bills and a few other things like that. Critical subscriber or customer information. There's all sorts of promotional stuff. There's all sorts of unnecessary notifications that you can check on. If you do need to see any of this information, you can check on when you choose to visit the website. Most social media and other websites by default try to put you on their mailing list. They do all this kind of stuff. And over the years, you've probably accumulated a lot of mailing lists that you're on if you're using email. Just unsubscribe from most of them. You mostly don't need them. And if you have 5 or 6 email lists, let alone hundreds, you can get bombarded just by the mailing lists. So that's not the way to do things. Now, Facebook and some others allow you to unfollow distracting friends and colleagues. You can still remain, quote, friends, unquote. You just don't get their content. I decided to just remove almost all social media apps from my smartphone. I took Twitter off, I took LinkedIn off, I took Facebook Messenger off, I took several others that I'd signed up for and just got rid of them. That really helped get rid of distractions on the phone. And the phone is a major issue because you have it with you virtually all the time. You can also block notifications from distracting apps that you can't remove. So you go into the settings of your phone, you look around, and you can usually find an option, often under a notification tab or section, where you can actually block the notifications. All of that really cuts down on the distractions that you have to deal with. Something I discovered a little bit later is an add-on for Facebook called Social Fixer, which comes with a built-in politics filter. You can configure this in a lot of different ways. It's very sophisticated to filter out certain phrases or posts with certain phrases. That way you can still keep contact with your friends or colleagues or other people without getting constantly distracted by their cat videos or their pro or anti-Trump postings or a lot of other content that people put out that you may not be interested in at all. I found Social Fixer really helpful. It gives you a much finer control than just unfollowing people, which I mentioned previously. So that worked very well. I've got some good ideas from Tristan Harris. He used to work at Google. He was a so-called design ethicist at Google. He's maybe most famous for this TED Talk that he gave a few years ago called How a Handful of Tech Companies Control Billions of Minds Every Day. It's worth watching. He's appeared on various podcasts and shows covering a lot of the same content, but really talking about how, especially advertising driven companies like Google and Facebook, they want your eyeballs. They want you to be watching the screen all the time, and they promote content and create content that tends to pull you in, which is often content that's negative. It's often things that produce outrage, that make you angry, that get you upset, and they hook you on conflicts, manufactured in real drama, political crises, all kinds of things. And so he talks a lot about how this is a really big problem, and also he has some good suggestions, which I followed some of them, to deal with this issue. So this is from the Center for Humane Technology, which he's part of, and they have a little section on things you can do to reduce these distractions. One of the things I did with Facebook, with my email programs, both Apple Mail on the Macintosh and Thunderbird, which I use on the Windows computer that I have, you can configure them in the settings. You can configure them so notifications in the form of these red badges that show so many unread emails, things like that, don't show up. These are very distracting by design. As it says here, notifications appear in red dots because red is a trigger color that instantly draws our attention. So you can go to Settings, Notifications, and turn off all the notifications, banners, and badges. It's a very good suggestion. It's what I did. I didn't find grayscale particularly useful for me, but this is one of the things they suggest to cut down on distractions. I did follow this advice to take the tools and things like that, put them on the home screen, put the other stuff on the other pages of the smartphone interface, and that helps a bit. I don't actually launch other apps by typing very often, but that is one of their suggestions. I didn't find it that useful. I always charge my device, smartphone, laptop, all these computers outside of my bedroom. I have a place set up for them. I leave them there when I am sleeping, so I basically almost never have electronic gadgets in the bedroom, and I do think that is helpful. And I went cold turkey. I removed all the social media, Instagram, and just about everything that social media was removed from my phone, and that really helped. I don't send audio notes instead of texting. Same thing here. I don't do this one. They're worth looking into. They also have a bunch of tools that you can get that in various ways help you use your time more effectively, meditate, all kinds of things to make your life easier and avoid some of these distracting problems that occur on mostly social media, YouTube, all kinds of things. So there's a lot of suggestions here. I think, like me, you'll probably find some of them work for you and some don't for various reasons. I really found, again, I found getting an office or working from home is helpful today. We have these open offices. We have a lot of distractions, just sound distractions at work. This was a problem at Apple, for example, where they transitioned actually from having offices to the open office environment. It's like a garment industry sweatshop environment, basically, except instead of sitting in front of a sewing machine, you're sitting in front of a computer, if you're lucky. I mean, like a big high definition monitor if you're lucky, and a lot of companies are trying to put you in front of a non-ergonomic laptop, which is really, really bad for you. You want to be sitting with really good posture and not looking down at that laptop. So get away from that type of environment and you'll be able to focus much better. I really like Deep Work by Cal Newport, who's also sort of an anti-social media person. He has almost 6 million views now of a TEDx talk about quitting social media. He says he never uses social media. So I found Deep Work really helpful. I'm not sure, it's not prominently displayed here. Here we go, Deep Work. That's the one I would recommend. Digital Minimalism, I got it and read sort of half of it. It's kind of a repeat of Deep Work. And so I think Deep Work is the original and is better and is really arguing in favor of, basically in favor of a really focused working style, which if you're doing things like I am, like algorithms, anything that involves really complex things, very deep thought, fundamental ideas, you really, really need to be working this way, or at least most of us do. People vary, so it's very important to remember these are what work for me. You may be different. So if you find it's not working for you, don't do it and find something that does. So let me go back here a little bit. I think that covers most of the things that I've done. So I have become very aggressive in turning off notifications, emails, really asking myself, do I need to receive this? Do not think FOMO. Do not think fear of missing out. Instead, these things, every interruption costs you several minutes because you have to process the interruption, think about it, and get yourself back to what you were trying to think about. So if you're getting them, as I was at one time, several per hour, you are very unproductive in general. Now, something that I found, so one other thing that I do now is every month I do a review. I look at my emails for the month. I look at what I'm doing and say, am I getting interrupted? Is something causing problems? Then I block those things or fix them because it's basically a running battle. It's a continuous battle because all of these websites and apps and other things out there keep trying to come up with ways to grab your attention. So you have to check periodically, like monthly or even weekly, but I'd say monthly works for me, to make sure you're not losing ground, and if anything new has shown up, you've done something about it and fixed it. The thing that I've had some more difficulty with is what I would describe as addictive, often negative content from YouTube in particular. I also ran into this with Twitter and eventually just killed my Twitter account about a month ago. Twitter, for me, is pretty useless, and I would actually recommend that you don't have an account even because you get sucked into reading a lot of often very negative stuff. But YouTube presents some real problems. There's useful content, tutorials, how-to information, lectures on all kinds of topics, computer science, business. There's a lot of useful stuff on YouTube, and this is true of other websites. There's also a lot of not so useful stuff, actually very negative stuff, the political stuff, very outrage material, things that try to get you angry. And of course, it goes ahead and it recommends things to you. Turn off the autoplay, by the way. You should never have it deciding what you're watching. And I've done a few things to cut down on the distractions from YouTube and some similar ones. I would say more, they're not exactly correctly described as distractions. They're addictive content. It's often very negative. That gets you into a situation where you're upset, you're anxious, and you keep viewing things or clicking on the next recommended video, that sort of thing. One thing that I think is helping that I've started to do the last couple of months is to sort of monitor my intake of negative content. Now, the issue is not whether that negative content is factually true or not. Okay, you get this with conspiracy videos particularly, where people say, well, the conspiracies are bogus, right? So we have this at a nationwide level where you have a conspiracy theory that the president is a Soviet agent or Russian agent, right? And you have his supporters saying that's a crazy conspiracy theory. On the other hand, you have the president and his supporters having their own sort of conspiracy theory about their enemies. So you get sucked into this, and whether this content is true or not is not the point. The point is it's highly negative. That makes you anxious, and it tends to be very addictive. If you're worried about, hey, think about the country or the world, right? Nuclear war, things like that could happen. These videos are tapping into these primal fears of war, of conflict, and you get hooked, and you also get anxious, and you're distracted by the fear. That's intentional. It sells advertising. So my point is to monitor the negative content you're taking in, whether it's news coverage, whether it seems true or false, whether it's horror movies that are ostensibly fictional or are definitely fictional, all kinds of content, and make sure you're not taking in a lot of it. Make sure that you go and focus on positive content. That can take a little bit of willpower because sometimes the negative content seems true, it seems like something you should worry about, but you are the intellectual content you consume. If you're always watching negative things, it's going to make you anxious and afraid and worried and negative yourself. So try to limit the number of hours of videos, of articles you read that are just very negative. And don't read these things and don't watch these things at night before you go to sleep. I mean, just turn it all off at some point. So limit and control and prioritize the negative content that you view. And I think that does help, although it's far from a perfect solution. So just to restate my major points, turn off non-essential notifications and emails, marketing emails, feel-good emails, things that are not practical. All you really need to know in a lot of cases is what is your bill for this month or this week or whatever the payment period is. Get rid of almost all your mailing lists, unsubscribe. Legally, mailing lists are required to have an unsubscribe link. Usually these work. Every now and then they don't. If they don't, you can block them. You can do other things to get rid of the mailing lists. You know, limit, either use unfollows if they're available if you don't want to offend people by unfriending them. You can also use things like Social Fixer, plugins to Facebook and other social media environments to filter out content that's distracting, makes you angry, causes various problems. I'm in favor of just get it all off your phone and get rid of Twitter entirely. Block notifications from apps you can't remove from your phone for whatever reason. Maybe that's an app you need to use. Maybe you are using WhatsApp or something like that, and you don't want to take it off the phone. WhatsApp is really only fully works on your phone, but you can block various notifications. Try to get a physical environment where you're not getting interrupted, such as an office or a cubicle. If you work at home, it's probably helpful to have dividers, have a separate work area from your kitchen, from your living room, etc. Deep work is worth reading, as well as watching some of the videos and podcasts with Tristan Harris and Cal Newport. And those are my suggestions for now, and I'm hoping to have more to talk about in a few months as I experiment with further ways to sort of cut down on the many distractions and addictive content that we're being bombarded with today. This video was produced on January 1st, 2020, New Year's Day. If you like this, please click the like button. If you have any comments or feedback, we are glad to hear from you. If you want to support what we're doing, we have a Patreon account, which you can find the link to on our YouTube channel and below.